Hello, everybody. This is Debbie Eno from Teacher Success Coach with another episode of or on the Female Educators Roundtable. But on a Saturday, I normally have the home education panel or speaker who will be speaking to us about home education and whether or not it is more powerful than the traditional education. Traditional education, we know that is the schools, right? Because that's traditional. It is so traditional, they have never moved anyway, still in the 16th century, right? So we're looking at how home education could be an alternative. For if you don't realize that there are alternatives to traditional education. So we've got a guest, Susan, who is going to introduce herself and tell us about the whole, what she does and how home education fits into the traditional role or doesn't it fit into the traditional role. And then my co-host, Alicia. So I've just introduced myself. Alicia, introduce yourself, and then Susan, introduce yourself, please.
Good evening. My name is Alicia Scott. I'm a home educator, as well as being a teacher, stroke educator, and I also I'm a mum.
Yeah.
Most important. Yep.
To be
okay, thank you very much, Alicia.
Yes. Amina, hi, I'm Susan Warclate. I home educated my son, and we are very passionate about the right of parents to choose how their children are educated and not necessarily at school. So that's who I am. I've written a book about it, and I can tell you more about that in a moment. So.
Right, brilliant. Thank you very much, Susan. And I said, as I said earlier on, is to give parents or carer a choice as to alternative, because too often we've all been, it's been pushed down our throat that, you have to go to school and the school is traditional. And as we know, as both Alicia and I are traditional educated teachers, we know that it doesn't always work for every child. So one size doesn't fit every child. And sadly, that's what's happening and what's been happening in the traditional education. So we need to be aware that there are alternatives and there are people doing great work like Suzanne and her team, etc. So we need to know, okay, how do we navigate and what we need to do? Years ago, if I was more aware of this, I would have probably home educated my children. Because as much as they did okay in the education system, I feel you have given them much more choices, and in terms of even given me much more autonomy as well. Okay, for stop, Susan, why did you decide to become a home educator?
Basically, the school system was failing my son. It wasn't something I set out to do from the beginning. But by the time he was 9, he was having real problems in school. The class teacher was bullying him, and he'd become very introverted. And it just seemed, I spent about a year going backward and forward to the school to sort things out, try and get things working for him. And it just wasn't. And one day Simon came to me and he said, "Mummy, I don't want to go to school anymore." And my first reaction was, "Go to school, I can't cope with this." And then the next day he came to me and said, "Mummy, I really don't want to go to school anymore." And he never went to school again, except on the day that we took in the deregistration letter and he wanted to hand it over to the headmistress himself, which is what he did.
Wow.
Amazing.
Okay, how many years ago was that?
That was actually nearly 20 years ago, to be fair. My son is now 29.
Wow.
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 So,
wow, well done. Alicia.
Sorry. Is it so yeah, sorry, I'm gonna what do you feel that traditional school lacks?
where do we start? I mean, my son's sort of sniggering here at the moment. I think it lacks the reflection of society as a whole. I think it's not normal in society to just mix with your own age group. I came through school, I had a reasonably good school experience, but I grew up believing that actually I only associated with people of the same age as me. And it wasn't until I went to college and then started working that you realize that your friends are older. One person I was friends with was actually older than my sister, and it was quite a, oh, that's weird. Do you know what I mean? And yet that's not true. And the thing Simon would say is that he's actually got such a broad range, age range and gender range, is that right? Of friends from as a consequence of being home educated, which is what you don't get in school. And they talk about socialization, but actually school is not a place to be sociable, because it's not like society in its normal way, if that makes sense. So,
Whoa, that's
I think
interesting.
the other problem is like,
one of the, it's interesting.
Sorry, I was going to say national.
No, Karen.
Is it says that the child must learn X, Y, Z on day 1, 2, 3, and that really doesn't work, because all children are different. They're going to learn at different stages. And the biggest issue, I think, beside the bullying that Simon had in school, is that he didn't learn to read and write as quickly as they thought he should. And I use the word should because I don't believe there is any should in life, but that was where they're at. And I would say that they rush them into reading and writing very quickly because they need crowd control. 30 odd children in a classroom, open page book, blah, 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 page such and such, read it, or write a page of writing. That is about crowd control. That's not about teaching. And if the children are not all reading and writing, then they've got to do something about it. And that was the biggest issue. The other thing is, when Simon actually went to college at 16, and he had learning support, and they actually tested him for dyslexia, and he was mid-range. He's 2.4 on a scale of 0 to 4. And his biggest issue is his short-term memory, which literally means if he looks up at the blackboard or the whiteboard, by the time he looks back down at his page, he has forgotten what he's seen. And so you can imagine in primary school, it's copy this off the board. He was failing miserably at that stage. And then he would get bullied by the teacher to say, why aren't you getting on with your work? Doesn't work, does it? And they don't have that time to actually recognize the differences in each child. So.
Wow, that's so powerful, because there are two things you say there in terms of when a child are having some challenges, because the teacher's role is, the end product, you have to, it's like a conveyor belt, isn't it? You have to get this all done so that you get to the next level. But I'm sure Alicia could, identify with that also, in terms of, this is what you need to teach the children, and come on, they've got to learn that. Because if they don't learn it, it is seen you being a bad teacher, that you cannot teach, not realizing that, hold on, one size doesn't fit all.
Exactly.
That is.
One of the conversations I had with a class teacher when he was about 8 is they were pushing him to do the cursive handwriting. And at that stage, as far as I was concerned, he hadn't actually learned how to wield a pencil properly, to form the letters properly. He still was using his gross motor skills and wasn't able to use his finer motor skills. And her response to me was, well, if he can't do cursive handwriting by the time they take their SATs level 2, he will fail. And I'm thinking, he's 8, they take their SATs level 2 when they're 11. You're talking 3 years hence. And she just didn't get it. So his handwriting ended up really quite difficult and untidy, because he wasn't taught the letters and given time to form his letters properly from the beginning.
Wow. It's so interesting when you know look at that. Alicia, that's your age group you taught, isn't it? Because you taught primary school.
Yes. So it's true. I do agree with what Susan was saying, that there isn't enough time to realize that children don't learn at the same pace. Yes, we're taught to group them, and sometimes that does work when you're working with the low ability and you've got the mixed ability and you've got the high ability. But even then, you still have, there's a variation, and I do feel that more time is needed to make sure that each and every child is succeeding. But often, it's not the case. You're not given that opportunity to spend that individual time. You do have the pressure from senior leadership that are just like, nope, this target's got to be reached, and if it hasn't, like Debbie said, you're seen as the bad teacher. And then you've got parents that get at you and like, well, why has my child not done this? But it's that taking that time to explain to them that, and to senior management, that you actually need time and to be able to go through with each individual child and learn what their learning style is, not just teach the same way for every single child, because that doesn't always work.
No. And actually, the other thing that Simon found is that he actually was put off reading by the Biff and Chip reading scheme, because in his mind, that if that was what reading was all about, he couldn't see the point because he wasn't interested in it. And it wasn't until he was about 11, and I ran a riding stables at the time, and I let him use the computer in the office. And as we were driving home, I said to him, so what have you learnt today? And he said, I've learnt what reading means. And I thought, that sounds a bit deep. And basically what he'd found is he was playing a game, and he discovered the drop-down menu, the help, to tell him how to play the game. And he suddenly realized that there was actually a reason for needing to be able to read. And so we then actually explored the reading at school, and he went, yeah, the Biff and Chip books were so boring, and he just couldn't see the point of reading if that was what it was all about.
You know what is so interesting about all of that, what you just said, Susan? Too often as educators, right? Educators are busy teaching the children, but not telling them the reason behind it. And you don't give them the reason behind it, they're not interested.
Exactly.
You just lose them. And that is so very true, because sorry?
Yeah, sorry, I was going to say I didn't like those Biff and Chip stories, even when he brought the little book home, and he didn't want to read them, but I'd look at them and go, these stories are really naff, aren't they?
Exactly. It's like, they're so boring. Every child goes through this. The sad thing about it's like a conveyor belt. You have to go through this, beef and cheap, and you're thinking, really? What else? The whole series of this beef and chip. My experience with that is not as an educator, but through children. That was the book that was coming home. And I must say that book wasn't being read because my children found it boring. And it's like that all three of them had to go through the same beef and chip.
Yeah.
It's just really, that's why when we talk about education, they have not moved on.
No.
20 years on.
Well, I still think they're in the Victorian era when they first set up schools, because schools were originally set up to teach people their place in life, not to educate them, but to actually educate them to be workers. And again, I still feel that a school is about teaching them to be reactive, not proactive, to do as they're told, not to have autonomous.
We are both nodding.
Exactly. Our home education.
We are both nodding.
Yeah, proactive thinkers now. Yeah.
That's not encouraged yet. If you get a child that's a free thinker in school, straight away, your parents are getting called in saying, oh, that child, they've got a special need or something's wrong with them. But it's like, no, actually, we've got someone who's thinking outside the box, and that's a child that we should be championing and, supporting, nurturing, encouraging. But straight away in school, as soon as you've got a child that's a free thinker, it's squashed and it's not encouraged.
Yeah. And I think the same problem with the ADHD, because those children are bored, and so they become hyperactive because they're just so constrained within that system. And I think it's the system that's causing those problems. And again, I can remember when Simon was 9, and I began to realize that things like 80% of children that truant from school are boys. Why is that? And then you've got that increasing incidence, and more so even today, of suicides in teenage boys to 30-year-old. And I could see the writing on the wall, Simon, when he died, and I didn't want him to be one of those statistics. And he will actually say to you now that I saved his life by taking him out of school.
I could see that though, because especially when he was being bullied by the teacher, that could definitely lead to suicide and self-harm, because it's like, who else could I turn to? You know, the fact that you were very on the ball mom, because some other mom might say, oh no, you just need to go back to school. You see, and by this child going back to school would lead to the child end up committing suicide.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the number of people that say, oh yeah, but you've got to learn to live with bullies. You've got to learn how to, that's crazy. Absolutely crazy.
I don't know.
Yeah, and that is one of the things that I've heard say is, you know, children need to learn how to stand up to bullies. Well, that isn't going to work, especially if it's the class teacher that's doing it.
Or I often hear, oh, it's character building. That's what I often hear.
Oh yeah, character building.
And I think that's awful that people are still using that rhetoric. I think that's very, very, it's the society, it just shows the society that we're currently living in. It just, when I hear people say, oh yeah, it's okay.
Yeah, it's the previous generation, you know, because when I grew up, we didn't say boo to a goose. We didn't, you know, teachers were God in their own classrooms type of thing. But it's not the right thing. It's not right. And I think my parents' generation, or even my generation, they believed that you had to go to school. In fact, actually, when I was thinking of taking Simon out of school, I actually asked a lot of people that I know, you know, what was your school experience like? And if you had the opportunity of not going to school, what would you say? And all of them, except for one, said, oh, but they've got to go to school. There was only one of my friends who said, I had a dreadful time and yeah, take him out. And she subsequently went on to home educate her own children. But everyone I spoke to said, but they've got to go to school. And I thought, why? I began to realize, I began to think about, I'm responsible for my child, and I want to influence my child to the best of my ability. So would I choose that teacher or that person to have influence on my child? And if the answer is no, why am I letting him go into her classroom every day? Yeah. And you just go, why am I doing that? And it's the same in other things as well. You know, if you went to a sports, say like even Cubs or things like that, if you don't trust the person that's taking the group, why am I leaving my child there without me? It's my responsibility. And the thing that actually happened after he came out of school is probably for a good year, if not 2 years, he would not let me leave him anywhere on his own. I had to sit in. If we went to the sports centre, he did trampolining. I had to sit by so he could still see me. We went to all these home education group meetings, but I wasn't allowed to even go across the road to the shop to buy something and leave him in that hall with the others. It took quite a while for him to actually start getting the confidence back to be able to stay with these people. And that was school, totally school.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. This is actually showing how the traditional education have really damaged.
Yes.
It could have even damaged him even more if you were not so astute and took him out, because the damage would have been even greater. Yeah. Something you said which is interesting. Why should we leave our precious possession in someone else's hand? Our children are precious. Why should we leave them in someone else's hand who we don't trust? It doesn't make sense in my head.
No. but we've been brought up to believe that teachers are autonomous, teachers are good, teachers love children. I'm not saying they don't, but there are some that are more autonomous in their own classroom rather than actually having an empathy toward the children. They just need to be doing on the treadmill. And perhaps they shouldn't be in the job. Should I say that?
No, but that is the truth. Because, you know, both Alicia and I, we could say that we know some educators, you know, who, you know, you look and you're thinking, really? Why are you an educator?
Yeah.
We've all had some of those.
Yeah, I know quite a few. And when people telling me, oh, I'm just here for the money, or I like the holidays, and I just look at them and I just think, that breaks my heart. And I'm so glad that my daughter's not gonna ever have you as a teacher. I would never want certain people that I've met and educators, I would never want my daughter to have them as a teacher, because for you to openly say in a staff room environment, I'm just here for the money, the holidays, I think that's shocking. Like, yeah,
totally.
And you know they're not joking. You know, it's the honest truth.
The sad thing is that this particular teacher was known for her having favorites. And I can remember talking to another parent, and she said, oh, I'm on first name terms with this teacher, so I hope she's okay with my son when he goes into her class. And isn't that dreadful? Wow. And even when we came out of school and we met up with the educational welfare officer, they had heard of her. They knew her. And she was still there. Nobody would get rid of her.
It's amazing, isn't it? Yeah. In what job would you actually keep someone on for so long? In the private sector, they're gone. But in the public sector, you know, you don't hear about sacking teachers, but some of them need to be sacked.
Totally.
Wow.
Or retrained.
Yes.
Wow. It's amazing. It really is. You know, when you think of that, you know, one other thing, because I do, I'm not based in any one school. I do agency cover, you know, agency supply teaching. And it is so interesting going from school to school that you actually see, as Alicia was saying, in terms of formerly teachers who don't want to be there, you know, because you automatically think, well, in my naiveness, right? Because I've been in one school for a very long time. And, you know, when I go to other schools, I think, okay, yes, but in my naiveness, I never realized that there had so many teachers out there that are not interested in teaching. I was naive. I didn't connect.
Yeah.
It's only now that I'm thinking, oh my goodness.
Yeah. And there's also that attitude of us and them. You know, the adults are autonomous and the children shut up and be told, do what they're told. And even if, like, one of the things that Simon really upset Simon is that another boy was banging his pencil and the teacher turned around and said, Simon, stop doing that. And he was sort of, wasn't me. But he couldn't answer back because that would have been rude. But it wasn't, and he thought that he could see the injustice of that. But they're not allowed to have a conversation. It's always the teacher's right, full stop. And that's not how it is. That's not how life is.
Exactly. That's so interesting, because on the platform yesterday, this is exactly what we were talking about. Because I was saying to them that when I go to schools and sometimes I have to be standing up for children in the presence of the teacher. I know sometimes I know the times I shouldn't do that, but there's sometimes I have no choice than to say to the teacher, no, well, he wasn't really being rude, you know, he was just trying to explain himself. And when I get to the staff room, I have to say to the teacher, well, I had to say it there and then because it was going to escalate. And that was a situation that didn't need escalating, because the child was just trying to say, but miss, this is not what happened. You've been rude. Stop talking back at me. He wasn't, you know, he was just explaining himself. And that drives me mad.
Yeah.
It really does drive me mad.
And they're not treated as equals. I know I used to give riding lessons at a riding centre. I ran a riding centre. And the thing that I noticed is how adults talk over the top of children, and the children almost behave like they're invisible. And I used to, when you had a new customer come, and I'd sort of I'd actually ask the child, so what's your name? And the child would almost be shocked. My gosh, she spoke to me, because most people would talk to the parent. Actually, that's funny, because I remember when Simon was about 2 years old and we went to visit my sister, and my mum said to me, what does Simon want for dinner? And I went, why are you asking me? Why don't you ask him? And he was about 2 years old at the time. And it's that whole, well, he's got a voice. He knows what he wants.
Yeah.
And he always has, actually.
I agree.
Yeah.
It's interesting. That's so interesting because it does take you back to the carer and the guy who is or the woman who is in the wheelchair. And automatically, someone in a wheelchair, you assume that it is assumed, which irritates me, that this person have no brain. So therefore, you're going to be talking to the carer, the person who is pushing the wheelchair. Yes. There's nothing wrong with the person that's in the wheelchair. He or she is just in a wheelchair. The brain is fine.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's so true.
It's a sad world that we live in a way. We don't treat everybody as equal. But,
Alicia.
Can you identify and explain 3 benefits of homeschooling that you feel, home education that you feel doesn't exist in the traditional schools?
The first one I would say is the freedom to choose. And actually, when I wrote my book, I've actually got a section in there of the pros and cons of home education. And I asked, because I wrote about our experience, and I also interviewed 4 other families that we actually home educated alongside with, and we're still friends with them now, like 20 years later, and they're in my book. And the one thing that overruling that came out of it was freedom to choose to do what they wanted when they wanted. And that really is the biggest difference. I mean, there were some things that Simon might stay in bed till lunchtime and we stay up to midnight doing something that had really caught his attention. It just varied, and you can't do that at school. You're there 9 till 3, Monday to Friday, full stop. And I must confess, having come out of the school system, you start realizing that society is so wrapped around the school timetable. Like the summer holidays, all of the daytime telly changes because, children are not at school anymore. And I just thought, it's more expensive to go on holiday because the children are not at school anymore. And you just think, it just really screws up society, I think, personally. So there's another
That's interesting.
That it just has such an influence on how society behaves, the timetable of people, and you just feel like stepping back and going, this is crazy. And I was thinking
that's so interesting.
Day, I did a lot of athletics when I was at school, and I come from Swindon, and I used to be in the athletics team, and we used to go to other schools to compete. But it occurred to me recently that all of those playing fields that I went and competed on are now housing estates. And the schools don't have their own playing fields anymore. And yet all of the schools in Swindon had their own playing fields. We would play all the sports, we'd do athletics, we'd go and compete with other schools. Doesn't happen now. And I think that is so wrong.
It's so true, because some of the schools I go to, they use the children have to go to the park for sports and things like that instead of the school, and the school just have the car park. And I thinking it is so true, because you see, there is nowhere for them at break time except, there's the car park. So therefore, they're hanging around, outside corridors and stuff like that, because there's nowhere else for them to play at playtime. That is so true. That is so true.
Playgrounds then either.
Yeah.
No playground either then. That's crazy.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just concrete. There's no, I've been to two schools and that's the situation. I'm thinking, oh, there's no playing field. So that is something I see quite a bit of. You were talking about your book, that David. What's your book all about? Would you like to take us on part of the journey of your book?
I can do that. It's probably back to front there. It's called Radical Home Education. This is a picture of Simon on the front. His banner is saying, give children a choice. And this is when he was about, I don't know, 11 or 12. We'd gone up to London to demonstrate for home education. And he'd made this banner out of a pizza box and we still got it. But the reason I decided to write the book is because home education gets such a negative press. And 2 years ago, early 2019, there was a program on Channel 4 about the invisible children, the lost children. And there was the education minister, Minister for Education. She was talking on there, talking about these home. Oops, we've stopped recording. Is she going to come back and carry on recording?
Yeah, I think but we'll continue. The show will continue, like you said. So yeah, please.
Oh, we're still live, aren't we? So we'll carry on.
Yeah, we're still live. Yeah.
Okay, got it. And Simon and I, we get so frustrated, and I must confess, we sit and grind our teeth sat here on the settee watching these programs that are they're pushing together the home education, the elective home educators, with children that have been off-rolled school, which again I think is really wrong, off-rolling, because the parents haven't chosen to have their children not at school. It's the school that has chosen to kick the children out. And I think that is so wrong. And so they were pushing together the whole lot as one entity. And even schools that are the illegitimate schools or the unregistered schools. But I think home education should not be clumped together. And actually what we were demonstrating back in early 2000s was about, they wanted to put home educators in under the umbrella of social services. And we were going, but we're not social services.
Yeah, I think I do remember this.
Yeah, we're educators. And it was like the Badman report that came out later and that sort of stuff. But I forgot what I said. Oh yeah, so excuse me. So we watched this program on Channel 4 and I just went, they don't know where the children are that were home educated that are now functional adults. And as I say, Simon's now 29, successfully running his own gardening business. He's been alongside me with volunteering within the local community, because we live in small hamlets, small villages here, and there's volunteer groups for helping keep people within the rural community. And Simon has been a volunteer driver for some of these groups, and he's helped with the local neighborhood plan. So how many children, adults of his age, get involved with that type of thing? He was the editor of the local parish magazine on the village next door. And when he went along to the meetings, he actually halved the average age of the whole meeting group, if you know what I mean, because he was so much younger than everybody else there. And what I'm saying is that he's grown up to be a functional member of society, and which is something that is leveled at home educators, that they're not able to socialize and they're not going to be part of society. And I think that's so.
All I ever hear, and it's one of my biggest bugbears, when as soon as you say to someone, "Oh, I'm a home educator," it's like you said, my child's being abducted by aliens, because the first thing that comes out of their mouth, "Oh my God, who do they socialize with?" And it's like, you don't go to school for socialization. That's not what school's about.
No.
Yeah, so that's one of the things that I do find quite frustrating, that straight away people don't ask what I think should be other questions, like but straight away they're just like, oh, socialization, they're not socializing. But how do you know? If you don't know something, you can't really judge.
No, exactly. But that is their first go-to, is How do they socialize? Oh dear, they're not able to socialize. But the thing is, in school, as I said earlier, being in the same age group, that's not being sociable in terms of society. And being in a group of people that you may not have any interests with, you could be in a whole room full of people, but if you have no interests with them, you're not socializing, you're on your own. And the only way, you know, the thing we found by joining up with home education groups, we met people with the same viewing about living. And I said to Simon earlier today, actually, I never did the mummy and baby coffee morning stuff because those mothers were just so, ooh. But
oh,
sorry.
I love this. Somebody watching.
But when we went and joined up with the home education groups, families, I would sit drinking coffee. We'd go to there's an ice rink in Swindon, and the children would be down on the ice rink and we'd be up in the coffee shop drinking coffee. But I really felt like I was having that mummy and baby fix with people that actually I got on with, that I didn't get on with, I didn't do when he was a baby. And that was the difference, because it was people that we actually got on with. We had the same ideas, with interesting people, and even the children. And again, we had toddlers to teenagers, boys and girls, adults. I've got horses. And one of the groups, each family brought something different to the home ed group. And I did what I called the trainee horse whisperers group in the field with my horses. And I had adults and children all out in the field playing with my horses. And it was just a whole range of people. And it just is incredible. And that's what home education is about. And in fact, one of the other things that one of the other mothers did, Sheena bought her son a Lego Minecraft. Yeah, sorry, I had to check with him. Lego Mindstorm kit. Sorry.
Oh, I don't know.
He plays Minecraft. That's another story. And she looked it up online and found that there was an international competition called the First Lego League International. And one of the regional competitions was happening here in Swindon. So we went along to watch to see what it entailed. And the children all watched and went, we can do better than this. So the following year, Sheena signed us up for the competition. And worldwide, everybody has the same challenge map, the same challenges for the robot. You have to do robot design, robot performance. You have to do a research project on the topic of that year. And that particular year was Ocean Odyssey. So our children looked into the noise pollution and the effect on whales and dolphins, which is actually really horrific. And they're also, so there's robot design, robot performance, project work, and teamwork. We beat 11 schools in Swindon. They went to the national competition. They came 5th nationally, which qualified them to go to the Open European Championships in Eindhoven, where they came 27th out of 52 teams worldwide. And that was amazing. The following year, they went into the same competition, and they weren't allowed to go to the international competition because the volcano had erupted in Iceland and nothing was flying. I don't know if you remember that, whether that's before your time. No, it can't have been before your time. Anyway, yeah, there was. So, and then the 3rd year they did it, they qualified to go to the Open Asian Championships, and they competed in Tokyo. They went to Japan and competed in Tokyo.
So a group of home educated children got a chance to go to, oh, that is incredible, beautiful to hear.
We funded it ourselves, obviously. We did, the first year we did actually get people to sponsor us, but after that we funded it, and Simon would never have got that opportunity. And they were just so keen to get out there and do it and compete. They chose to be part of that team.
That must have definitely boosted so many of their confidence. I know that, like, for myself, that would just literally just make me feel like so secure that I'm at a national or international competition, and yeah, doing something that I enjoy. That's amazing.
Yeah. So in my book, I've literally written about our experience of home education from who he was as a child up to adulthood, and the 4 other families that we met along the way. And as I say, we're still friends with Simon's, still best friends with them now. And even the parents he's friends with, and I'm friends with, obviously. And also the book also includes things like frequently asked questions and what we did and where we did it. And the last chapter is about the different learning styles, because one of the other things that I found with Simon when he first came out of school is that because it didn't hurt, he didn't think he was learning anything. And he had this concept that learning hurt.
Can you explain a bit more what you mean by that, Susan?
Well, I'll tell you what I did about it, and then you'll see what I mean.
Yeah, thank you.
So I put up a flip chart in his bedroom, and I drew a big circle, and I split it into 8 sections, and I labeled them the Gardner's 8 intelligences. So you've got linguistic, mathematical, logical, blah, 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 all the way around. And each day we went up to that flip chart at the end of the day, and I said to Simon, so what have you done today that accessed your linguistic intelligence? What today did we do that accessed your mathematical, logical intelligence? And we filled something into every single one of those 8 sections each day. And it didn't take him long to realize that actually he was learning, and it didn't hurt. It wasn't hard. Because the other thing when he first came out of school is he was too scared to try anything new in case he got it wrong. And that is so wrong. That is so bad. Sorry.
Yeah, my daughter's like that. Like in school they were always telling her that she wasn't good at certain aspects, and then she would come home and then she'd be so afraid to even try. And just for example, my daughter is a sight reader, and she just didn't get phonics at all. She used to get bored in the phonics lessons. She used to walk out of them, and the teacher kept saying to me, oh, she's never going to learn to read. She's never going to learn to read. And, oh, you know, you should be embarrassed being an educator yourself that your child can't read. And I just remember that she was a sight reader, because one day she just was on the bus and she just read the sign where pregnant ladies sit, and she just read it word perfect. And then I was like, you're not, that's why you were finding phonics difficult. You're not a phonetic reader, you're a sight reader. And that's, but obviously the school hadn't identified that, and they weren't able to support her. They just kept thinking, you need to be like the rest of the children, do phonics. But she found it very, very difficult. Yeah.
And I think again, they're too intense on the education bit of it, the educationalists, like the phonics. Why are they learning phonics when you can learn to read? It can be all part and parcel instead of separating it all out like that. And actually, the first time I realized that Simon was actually able to access the written word, and he had struggled, was when we went to the Harry Potter film. It was the one where with Tom Riddle, and he wrote in the diary. And normally,
I don't know any Harry Potter, sorry.
Oh, no. But normally, if we were at a film or something, and if some writing came up on the screen, he'd nudge me and go, what does that say? Because also it's different. I find sometimes the writing goes too quickly. You know, somebody puts something up. But that particular film, he didn't nudge me to say what's written on the film. And so I knew then that he was accessing what was written up there. And that's the first time I got that he was able to access the words. And he was probably about 12 or 13 at the time. So reading isn't something that has to happen it happens at the right time. And actually, apparently, learn to read takes 100 hours at the right time. Yeah.
So we know, Susan, when children are in primary school, their results are normally quite high. They're curious learners. They really enjoy learning. But when they get to secondary school, this is lost. How can this be maintained, do you feel, as a home educator?
I actually dispute that statement, to be fair, because I don't think it is the truth. I think the reason that the children just get on with it is because at that age they are taught to do as they're told. It's not until they get to secondary school that they start perhaps be having a bit of a mind of their own. But I don't think they are learning that well at school, even at primary level. And I think that it's just that they thing with Simon, when I had a problem with him going to school, there was a point where he took 10 days out of school the year before we decided to home educate. And the headmistress was amazed. I said, I got a stressed child. I don't know what to do. And she said, but he's so good and quiet at school. But he just shut down. He just didn't say boo to a goose. And the other thing is, just before I brought him out of school to home educate, I read in a book, and it said in the book, you've really got to like your children a lot to have them home, teach them 24/7. And I looked at him and thought, do I? Because I had a stressed child at home. As soon as he stopped going to school, I did not have a stressed child. We enjoyed each other's company. And going back to what you said earlier, Debbie, about being able to teach them, I didn't teach him. I facilitated his learning. We did totally child-centered, autonomous learning, child-led, completely. And that basically, probably for the first 2 years, he didn't pick up a pencil, because I went to school, as far as I'm concerned, I sat at a desk with a piece of paper and a pencil. But I knew that if I put that to, Simon came out of school, if I'd have made him do that, he might as well have been back at school, because that was his stress trigger. And yeah, he didn't need to. He did whatever he wanted to. But we discussed things. We didn't do it with a piece of paper and a pencil. Say when we were unloading the hay, we had 40 bales of hay in the back of the trailer. We had 2 hay feeders to put the hay into. So you're emptying the hay bale, moving hay bales. And I said to him, so, okay, we've got 40 bales, 2 feeders, how many in each? And if the horse, so you're getting the sums here. And if the horses eat 3 bales a day, when will we need to, how long will these bales last? And when would we need to buy some more? So it'd be like 13 days and one over, 1 bale over. So we'd have to buy some more on Tuesday or whatever. And as we were physically moving the bales. And it's practical maths. You don't need to be sat at a desk. And he understands those sort of questions, whereas a lot of children can't relate the practical element of mathematics and arithmetic, because they literally do it on a piece of paper, bump, bump, bump. But my sister, a maths teacher, she was a secondary school maths teacher, and her biggest problem is that children were not taught the arithmetic process properly in primary school. And I can remember Simon brought home some homework, and on it was a subtraction sum, and the top line in the units was a 0, and then there was like a 6, and then other numbers. And I know, because I trained as a chemistry teacher, that there are 5 different ways. I don't tell people that. No.
All right. So we're 3 teachers here. All right.
I never actually went into teaching, because I realized that I couldn't see why. I went into these classrooms and I'm stood in front of 30 odd children who didn't want to know what I had to say. They didn't want to know. And I just thought, what am I doing here? I didn't even actually get into the classroom except for teaching practices from college. I did go on to be a riding instructor, and I find that people who come to me for riding lessons wanted to learn. I got no problem with that. I also taught in the local college. I taught understanding horses. And again, it was an evening class. So the people that have chosen to come into my classroom want to know what I've got to share with them. And that's the difference. But what was I talking about at college? I forgot what I was saying. Took me off a tangent there. Oh, maths. I knew from college that there are 5 different ways to teach subtraction. And I said to Simon, so which way have they taught you to do subtraction? Because I always did the borrow one and pay it back. And there are other methods. Yeah. And so Simon didn't know. So I wrote on his homework bit, how do you teach subtraction when there's a 0 at the top and a number at the bottom? And the teacher wrote back, we expect them to do it, capital letters, mentally, underline, underline, underline. And the problem is, to be able to do it mentally, you have to know it or understand it concretely. So as far as I'm concerned, she, as a teacher, did not understand arithmetic process. And I think that is the biggest problem in primary school, is that primary teachers, hopefully I'm not talking to you.
Alicia, your primary teacher?
But that is true. And I'll tell you another story. Can I?
That's
when
fine.
Simon was at school, he came home and he said to me, we did about the sun and the earth today, and the teacher told me that the earth goes round the sun in one day. And I sat and thought about it, and I went, okay, yeah, no, that's not true. That's not right. The sun, the earth rotates on its axis in one day, but it actually takes 365 days to go around the sun. And I thought that maybe Simon had just misheard, got it wrong. But we had one of his friends from school at the time come and stay with us. We went to America, and he came and stayed with us in America. And we went to this museum, and there was this great big earth. And I said to Johan, how long does it take for the earth to go around the sun? And he went, 1 day. And he'd been in the same class, the same level. That means that got it wrong, seriously wrong. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah.
What are they teaching them?
Yeah. So all those are also reasons you say, you know what? Let me take my child out to school because he's not learning anything. You know, the interesting thing about it is my 15-year-old doesn't like school. The other 2, you know, they were okay at school. They were okay with school. But this one is telling you blatantly in your face that he doesn't like school. He doesn't see the purpose of school because he's learning nothing.
Yeah,
and it's kind of a challenging. You know, because
challenge. And I mean, I spent a year complaining at the school and eventually went, this isn't working. And I even looked at other alternatives. You know, they suggested taking into a different school, and I thought we're still going to have the same problem. I looked at the Steiner Waldorf school. It's 60-mile round trip in Stroud, and I went to visit that school, and I came home and cried. I looked into the private school that Simon's friend Johan had ultimately gone to, and I just thought, no, that's even worse. And in the end, it's home education, because school system is not working. It's broken. Seriously broken.
Very true statement.
Yep. You know, the interesting thing about it, when it comes to private school, I do feel, because I taught in a private school over the 10 COVID. And as much as the classes are small, I feel that the children are robots.
Yeah. Yes. And actually, size of classroom doesn't make any difference, because actually Simon went to a village school that's set on two sites, 2 different villages. Reception year 1, year 2 was in the lower school. 3, 4, 5, and 6 was in the upper school. Maximum of 130 children in the whole school, and he had 18 children in his class. Size of class makes no difference. He was still being bullied by the class teacher and not learning.
mm, mm, mm. Wow, my goodness. It's interesting that because when you look in terms of, the private school and looking at alternative to tradition school, you're thinking they're all same tradition. Private, the only alternative I personally see is home education. Because one of the things during the pandemic, I was saying to parents who was reaching out to me, I said, you need to stop teaching the children in the way the school wants you to teach the children. And Alicia, you also had experience of that, because there is no way that, we're talking about 6 lessons a day. There's no way your parents going to be doing this 6 lessons a day. It's a joke. And even when we do 6 lessons, somebody like me, when I do 6 lessons, my 6 lesson is very, I'm not a traditional teacher. So my 6 lesson, if I have the same group, 6 lessons is combining to God knows how many. Because you see, I do not feel that it has to be so prescriptive. And I said to parents, one thing you need to be looking at is maths is everywhere, English is everywhere, chemistry and the sciences everywhere. Just use everywhere to embrace your child instead of doing it in the school prescriptively. Yes. And something I had, because my son was being done, they were doing on the platform, the online. And one of the things is, so I was also teaching online. So I was downstairs, he was upstairs. When I go back upstairs, my child, he was doing his own thing. So I said to him at some point, I said, you know what? You're not seeing, the teacher is not seeing you. Sometimes you're not seeing the teacher because everybody have the camera off. After every 20 minutes, I want you to get off and go and walk around and do something. There is no point in you sitting at that computer for all this time. You guys are not engaging. And it's sad that the penny is not dropping. That's the reason why when it comes to home education, I am such a fan and a promoter of home education, because education is everywhere. We need to start embracing that concept.
Exactly. You say that, and what early on when Simon was first being home educated, we went to visit some friends of his, and he related this conversation to me as we were driving home, and Catherine had said to him, so what do you do for your English lessons? And Simon had replied, nothing. And I looked at him, no, I didn't look at him because I was driving. I went, what language do you speak? You're doing English all the time. And it's that concept that you have to sit at a table and be with a piece of paper and a pencil, and then you're doing English. And that is crazy.
Exactly.
But it's about conversation. A lot of it is about conversation.
Exactly.
I went and trawled the charity shops for box games of word games like Upwords and Scrabble, and I think our favorite was Cats, Dogs and Hogs. Just these word games that we found in the charity shops, and that gave him the opportunity to look at words, and I'd let him use the dictionary to find words. And isn't that a better way to learn about words and language and different spellings than the very narrow view in schools? But it goes back to when we learned in school, and I think nothing's changed. Nothing. In fact, it's got worse. I think it really has got worse.
Nothing have changed. Nothing have changed. It's like one of the schools I taught at as well. That's the beautiful thing for me right now, being a supply teacher. I have the opportunity of going into different schools and experimenting with different schools. I taught in one of the schools in the countryside, and one of the beautiful things for me was it was this school in the middle of a field. So you had all the field. I just loved it. I was teaching my lessons outside because it was in the summer. So I taught my lessons all outside. We were using the flip chart. The wind was blowing it. It was fantastic. The students have learned so much because they've never been taught outside. And me now, not a conventional teacher, saying to them, you know what? I'm going to teach you guys outside. Miss, what do you mean? I said, we're having a lesson outside on the grass. I said, we are going to sit on the grass. And we sat on the grass, they did their flip chart. Two people held it up. It was a fantastic session. The wind blew it away at some point and they had to run after it, but it was fantastic. It was so non-traditional. And later on, I was talking to the deputy head, and he's saying to me, oh, we have an outdoor classroom. So they actually have an outdoor classroom, but they don't use it. So the next lesson, we went into the outdoor classroom, and it was just sitting on the lawn. So much learning took place while I was there. Very different, but the students were able to connect because everything, you have lessons all around you. And that's what we need to move away from, this traditional concept of thinking education need to be in a building. This pandemic have taught us that we are teaching online. So you don't have to be in a building.
No. And you can access it whenever you want to. One of the girls that I interviewed for the book, who now has got her own family, and she's a second generation home educator because she herself was.
Whoa, we need to interview her.
I don't know if she will. She's quite introverted, shall I say.
Oh, right.
But she said that she would stay in bed all day and then she would work all night, and she'd do whatever she wanted to. And the thing she loved about being home educated was the freedom to choose. And she was able, and she's a really well-rounded, lovely person. But as I say, during that, if anyone had come in to assess her, and there she was in bed all day and working all night, they would have said it wasn't an appropriate education, and yet it was for her. And actually they do say that teenagers really need to stay in bed in the mornings and get up and work in the afternoon. But why are they having to be at school for 8 or 9 o'clock in the morning? They're still a bit bleary-eyed. And again, that's what I liked Simon, the freedom to get up when he wanted. That was the best thing actually about not going to school. Having to get up and get to the bus so that he could get to school, and then having to get home in time to meet him from the bus. It didn't matter what time we got up. It didn't matter where we were, whenever we wanted to be there. Freedom to do.
It's interesting what you've just spoke about regarding teenagers needing more sleep. There's a school in America. They've actually done a research and have identified that before 10 o'clock, you do not have the brains of the young people because they have not yet clued on. So that school was starting lessons at 10:30, and they say they got a lot more from the student because by that time the brain is clued on. 10:30, they're ready to learn, etc. And it's earlier than that, forget it, you're not having them. And it is statistically proven in terms of research. So I really don't understand why we're still here in terms of how we actually educate these young people. And I think, is it Sweden?
I got a theory on that. Yes, I think it is Sweden that do it differently. But I've got a theory about child minding. They want the adults to go out to work, and therefore they need somebody to look after the children. And therefore it's got to be 9 till 3 because the parents need to go to work. Sorry, that's a bit controversial.
It does make sense. It does make sense. It does make sense. Alicia, you want to take the next one?
How many parents couldn't work through the pandemic? How many parents couldn't work through the pandemic because the children were at home?
Yeah.
We have touched on this question, but just if you could go more in depth, please, Susan. How do you feel that home education prepares young people to navigate the real world more than traditional school does?
I think, as far as I'm concerned, Simon was mixing with a broader range of society, whereas in school it literally is your own age group, and even in, say, like a primary school, you're only up to like 11-year-olds in the same, you're not mixing. And also within school, the adult is, you do as the adult tells you. You don't have any autonomy within what you're doing. One of the things that I had when I first told my parents that we were going to home educate Simon, what they said was, how can we help? And so Simon spent and so Simon spent a lot of time with my parents. My father taught him woodworking. He also taught him gardening. Simon would work alongside my dad in the garden. My mum would help him with craft things. And in fact, Simon now runs his own gardening business. And when he's out sort of doing gardening, he says, Granddad said, you know. So he learned a lot from my father. And so that's the range, isn't it? How many children get that opportunity to spend that much time with an older generation?
That's very true.
Yeah.
That's very, very true. What would you say were the challenges and triumph of home education?
Sorry, lost that one.
Oh, I'm saying to you, what would you say were the challenges and triumph of home education?
Initially, it is scary. You feel like you're jumping off the edge of a cliff and you don't really know where the parachute is, and you don't know what to do. And I can remember the first time I arranged to meet up with a home education group, or I believe to be a group, in Bowood House, which is a grounds and house, and I couldn't find them. And we went back to the cafeteria and we sat and drank a cup of coffee, and I nearly cried because I'm thinking, I've taken them out of school and I can't even find other families to interact with. We did eventually find them, but that is quite scary. But eventually we met up with loads of home educating families. We had regular meetings. We went to the Oasis every Monday and the Link on the Wednesday, and we met up in church halls, and each family brought something to it. And it was just like a whirlwind. Like, from once we started, it was just amazing, absolutely amazing. And I learned alongside him, if that makes sense. As I said, I facilitated his learning. But if he was interested in something, we would go and find out about it. We would go and look at it and do it. And I was able to share stuff with him. Like, I bought some alpaca, so we then started going to spinning and weaving guilds. And so Simon would come with me because he loved that sort of stuff. He actually did, once he went to college, he did A-level fashion design and textiles. And the women at these spinning and weaving guilds thought he was great. He would help move the tables and the chairs. He actually joined in with the weaving group. So he'd go off with the other women with the looms and do weaving. It's all part of life. My mother would come along with us to weaving and spinning and weaving guilds, and we did braiding as well. Went to a braiding group, and so this got him interested in the crafts as well. So he was able to go on and do the A-level fashion design and textiles at college, amongst other things.
It's interesting, though, something you've said in terms of what it actually gave him. And, the anxiety that was around not finding the group. Is like, oh my goodness, what do I do, etc. That's quite interesting, because it's like, because you weren't so confident in yourself and people wasn't promoting home education as much, you're thinking, have I made a mistake? What have I done? Because here I have my child, and what do I do with him? I don't know what to do with him, because am I failing him? So it's like all that anxiety. But I'm sure if you had to do the thing right now, you're going to think, oh, well, it's common now, much more common than it was. I think that's a thing, isn't it?
Exactly. People used to ask me, what was my aim for Simon? And I'd say, my aim is to produce a happy, functional adult. And you have to hold your breath, because you don't know that that's going to happen until you get there. And we're now, like I say, he's 29, and as far as I'm concerned, he's a happy, functional adult. But it took us 20 years.
He's around the time.
20 years ago, I don't know how he's going to. I'm just hoping that what I'm doing for him will help him along that path, along that route. Certainly school wasn't going to. School was not going to do that for him.
What is also so interesting, like you say you learn alongside Simon. That's the same thing Alicia said in a few weeks ago when we actually had the interview. The same thing she was saying, that she learned alongside her child. And it's so fascinating because when you think that, you and your child are doing things together, exploring together, it's such a wonderful thing because the child realized that mommy don't have all the answers. So therefore we are going to learn it together.
Yes, exactly. And that's what we did as a group. The parents, the adults would mix in with the children. It wasn't just, oh, the children are doing this and we're going to do that. We all mixed in together. It was great. It was an absolutely amazing experience. Absolutely. Really was. So, yeah.
That's really is.
And that's why I
It's
wrote my book.
powerful. Yeah, so you need to actually drop the link in the you need to drop the link. Actually I'm gonna review your book. Yep, I'm gonna review the book. Are you, as a result of that, do you now run a business in terms of home education?
No, I don't. Because I wrote the book purely for our benefit, because I was so fed up of the negative press. And I wanted to say, look, here are children, now adults, that are successful adults that have got there. This is proof that home education works. And that's really what the book was about. Since the start of the pandemic, because the book was launched in the back end of 2019, so it was quite new when everyone then started having to do school at home. And the book, I aimed the book at new or would-be home educators, but then you sort of start bringing into the group that the school at home group that were really having struggles. And what I'm doing now is I'm putting together online courses to help parents understand who their children are. Like I said to Alicia earlier, I used Gardner's 8 intelligences to actually help Simon work out where his preferred learning styles were, the multiple intelligences. We talked about the VARC, visual, auditory, kinesthetic learning, the disc profiling, the personality profiles. And I think actually, if you understand the personality of your child, the learning style, the preferred learning style of your child, and what multiple intelligence they can access best, then you've got a better chance of facilitating and helping them through their journey. And so my course that I'm in the process of putting together is about helping parents even to recognize their own learning styles. Because when we did our disc profiling, we realized that I'm opposite to Simon in our disc profiles, in our personality profiles. So it made me have to think about how he's thinking and how I'm thinking differently, and that we could actually then work help each other in a way, because we had different ways of looking at stuff. And so that's what I'm doing my course on. I'm still in the process of putting that together based on the book, based on chapter 9, which is the different learning styles. The other thing that we actually got involved with, my sister trained as a brain gym consultant, educational kinesiology, and that worked amazingly with Simon in the early years. And that is well worth looking at as a way of helping you see things differently, how getting your brain working in a different way. And so as I say, chapter 9 is about the different learning styles and how to access them for children. So again, my course is going to be written about that. I'm starting writing an ebook about the frequently asked questions. And then recently I'm on a number of home ed Facebook groups. And the one thing that's coming up at the moment that people seem to be really concerned about is having to write a report for the local authority. And even though technically, legally, they're not obliged to write a report, if they don't send in a report, the local authority then assumes the worst and assumes that the parents are not fulfilling their parental obligation as per Section 7 of the 1996 Education Act. And we learned that that law almost immediately, because you can then start spouting at people. And I remember having a conversation with the educational welfare officer at one stage, and I said, So do you think I'm not fulfilling my parental obligation as per blah, blah? And she went, no, 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 you're fine, you're fine. I went, okay, so I don't need to meet with you then, do I? And she won nothing. But you got to stand your ground, because they are trying to take over and control. And I think the sad thing is that France has now passed a law that as from next year, it's going to be illegal to home educate. Germany already, it's illegal to home educate in Germany. But I tell you what, and I don't think anyone realizes this, or the law in Germany was passed by Hitler that all children had to go to school. And you know why that was? Because he wanted to control his youth army.
Nation. Yeah. That's something else, you know, in terms of home education. Another thing is, where's your book? Is it on is this in Amazon?
Yes, you can get it on Amazon and Kindle, and I can send you the link to Amazon.
Yes, please. Yes. Because there's, you know, I do feel that it's important that it gets promoted in terms of for parents who want to home educate their children, you know, and also, you know, there's
my Facebook group, didn't you? Radical Home Education. That's how you contacted me through.
Yes. Oh, so that's okay. That's your group. Okay, I was just, you know, just looking for groups, and then your group came up. They're just two. I just noticed there just seems to be two home education group I'm finding.
Sorry.
I found two home education group. One of them have not. There's one of them that posted something since 2016.
Okay, I don't know. Mine is a page rather than a group, so it's people can just come onto it and like it, and so that I set it up to promote the book sort of 2 years ago, because it's the same name as the book.
Okay.
So that was really the rationale of setting up the page. And I do actually go on to other home education Facebook groups and pages and say, come visit my page.
Okay. Can you probably send me the link of the other home education Facebook group, please? Because I want to, you know, I do need to get them, you know, interview so we could actually talk about that. Because I also do feel that your book needs to be actually at the top there, because people need to know that if you have trouble, here is one, and home education does work. Alicia, there you are. That's your extra backing. Home education does work. You know, because that's.
Sorry, go on.
That's one of the things, finding the evidence to support. You know, now you have the evidence because you've got the book.
The book.
Yeah.
One of the children, or a number of them in the group, they did Open University courses from early teens. One of them, by the time he was 20, had a first-class honours degree through Open University. He's gone on and did a master's, and he's now doing his doctorate in a university in North London. He has not got any GCSEs. You don't need them.
Interesting.
And some of the others, in fact, a couple of the others that did OU, they got into university with their OU credits, didn't take GCSEs or A levels. So, you know, this whole thing about 16, oh, they've got to take their GCSEs, how are they going to do it? They don't need to. In fact, Simon didn't start any formal education in effect until he went to college at 16. When in 3 years, he did A-level fashion design and textiles, GCSE photography, he did skills for life, maths and English, and he did a BTEC in software development and web design, and he did a business studies course in 3 years.
Wow. Exactly.
And he hadn't done anything academic, really sort of formally academic, until he went to college at 16.
Wow, this is really demonstrating that home education does work. Yeah, Alicia, I see you walking back and smiling, right? Yeah, it really shows that it does work. And when the school wants to force parents to pigeonhole their children into these boxes, you know, and say that, you know, they need to get this, it doesn't prepare them for life anyway, because they come on and they can't spell and read anyway, so it don't make a difference.
Exactly.
so true. It is so true. It's
Sad.
so true. It is. It is.
I don't know
It
what
is.
the alternative can be, because parents need to go to work. Children want to be educated, you know, or they need to be learning something somewhere. And I don't know what the alternative to our school system is. I just know that at such a young age, they're pushing them too young. I mean, in Germany, they don't start in kindergarten. They don't come out of kindergarten until they're 7. They don't sit down with a pencil until they're 7. I think the same is in Scandinavia. Why are we pushing 3 and 4-year-olds to wield a pencil when they can't even move their arms yet, have control of their arms? It's crazy.
It's madness. I think is it Sweden that they only go to school for half day, they finish at 2.
Yes.
You know.
Yeah.
And when you think of that, you know, they have, in terms of academic ability, they have the highest academic rates. You know, when you look at England and America, they're going to school all day, and yet still they can't string a sentence together. So it really is amazing as to what is education, isn't it?
Yeah. When Simon was actually at school, and in primary school, he only went to primary, and they sent him home with homework, I actually wrote a letter and I said, Simon's got a life outside school. He's not doing homework.
It's interesting because I'm one of these teachers who don't believe in homework. And I remember one of the principal deputy interviewed me for a job in the school, and he said to me, "Okay, how are you going to assess this student?" They said, you know, in order to assess the student, you know, we give homework, etc. So I said to him, I don't believe in homework. I said, homework doesn't work. Well, and I didn't expect to get the job anyway, but I got the job, and I was so amazed that I got the job, because I said, I don't believe in homework. I said, if I'm teaching the students, I say, okay, tomorrow we're going to learn about the brain. So you guys make sure when you come in, you've got an idea what we're going to be talking about. Because there's no point in giving homework. Homework does not work. It's only for the benefit of parents. Parents want, you know, a prop. So they expect educators to give their children homework. There are schools in Bedfordshire that have decided that they're not going to give homework. It doesn't work.
No. And I remember
I know I'm going to be attacked for that, but it doesn't work.
My sister used to say that homework was about teaching autonomous learning. And I said, well, actually, if the parent's doing the homework for the child because the child can't, who's doing the learning? It's not the child.
Exactly. That's spot on. It is so very true, because all those countries in Europe there where they don't give any homework, and yet still the children so high in terms of academic ability. In England, they feel that every time you need to give children homework, but as you rightly say, half of the homework is being done by the parents, and the teachers don't mark the homework anyway. Let's be real. We don't have time to mark the homework. So what's the point of giving the homework? Alicia, you know I'm saying truth there. Speak the truth.
Exactly.
No, you can deal with the backlash.
Yeah, so you might as well say but you might as well encourage the child to read a book, or encourage them to do something else, because we know, I'm being honest, right? We know we have so much work to do as educators, right? When do we have time to mark this homework? And when teachers mark the homework, right, they just give it a tick. You know how much time I used to take my children's homework and say, oh yeah, you did homework. Okay, the teacher marked it. When I look at it, you could tell the teacher didn't read the whole thing. It's full of errors in it.
Yeah, exactly.
So why give the teacher so much pressure? Why?
I think using the red pen is also not very nice either. When I did an evening class, when I taught the evening class understanding horses, and I actually set an exam paper, so I had to mark it. I would use a green pen to mark it.
Yeah, more positive.
I use green,
Yeah.
I use green. I don't use red. I use green. I use purple. I use any other color except red. I have not used red for years. Purple, green, any color I find except red. And it's interesting though, because even now when you say to some teachers, I find it so shocking, because I did not think that teachers are still using red pen. In some of the schools I went to, after we've gone in, after the, pandemic, we went back in March. I see some teachers are using red pen. I'm saying, why are you using red pen? I said, red pen has gone up. People don't use red pen. Yes, we do. Really? Why are you using red?
Yeah.
It's just amazing. The education system is so
broken.
Goes
along with the whole school system. Exactly.
Yeah, it is true. It is true. Alicia?
So finishing up, Susan, what 3 tips would you give for someone who's considering homeschooling? So
home education.
Home education. 3 top
That's
tips.
Fine. You have the right to do it. And as a parent, it's your parental responsibility to ensure that your child has an education. So believe that you have the right, and you don't have to answer to the local authority or any of these people about it. And you can do whatever you want, what works right for you and your children in whatever way you want it to happen. And again, you don't have to take GCSEs at 16, like I said earlier. It's not, they will learn in their own way. And I see on some of the Facebook groups, the home ed Facebook groups, and people are saying, I've decided to home educate my child. They're 3 years old. What do you think I should be doing with them? I'm sort of playing with them. There's nothing academic that you should, they would come back to that word again, that you need to be doing with them. Just live life. I mean, we did lots of conversations. We just did stuff. There was, I got a number of examples in my book of where we were just discussing stuff. We've got ragwort plants out in the field, and we were digging up these ragwort plants because they're poisonous. And so we then started having this conversation about the poisonous ragwort plants, and that there are some caterpillars, the cinnabar caterpillar, that actually feeds off the ragwort plant because it then makes it poisonous for the birds, so the birds don't eat them. And then we started talking about, well, if we didn't have plants, then we wouldn't have the carbon dioxide oxygen exchange. And then we started talking about all of that sort of stuff. And you're doing it while you're digging up the ragwort. And this is the way we did it. It wasn't, oh, we're going to do chemistry today, or we're going to do biology today. We just fell into a conversation about it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. It really does. It's like I'm looking at Alicia's face going, yes, yes. Yes, I'm looking at your face going, yes, yes. Yeah, that's interesting. Wow. Thank you very, very much, Susan. It was fantastic. It was a brilliant session in terms of, the amount of nuggets that you've actually shared. And one of the big things for me is that book. Because when people are saying home education doesn't work, well, there it is. There's evidence because you've actually, done it 20 years, exactly. So nothing is better than real life experiments. That is actually showing that proof that something does work, because you have the real life experiment to show as evidence of something have worked. So it's not to say that is anybody perception or they think, etc. No, it's not. There is the evidence in front of you. And that's brilliant. That is one of the brilliant things for me in terms of, the book. Because when I saw, that you said that you've written a book, I thought, oh, good, because I think it is important. That we actually support it and say, yes, well, as much as having other people that say, well, I've gone through the home education system and here I am at the other end, we also have it in a book that says, yes, as well as having, primary resource, we've also have it in a book. And that's enough evidence to show, well, it works. Because we know the education system, I'm talking for me, I know the education system does not work. I know when I look at the education system, how it is and how the children are still standing in classroom. That was how my grandmother used to be sitting in classroom, and she's been dead God knows how many years ago. And it has been done the same way. Sit in rows, face the front, you know, while the teacher writes, it's no longer blackboard, they're writing on the whiteboard, the same concept. The same concept. So the fact that COVID have actually taught us, hold on, there are other things you could do, you know. It doesn't have to be, you know, it doesn't have to be the way you want, you know, you think it should be done. There are other ways to do it. And learning meant to be fun, enjoyable.
Yes.
And the children are meant to, young people are meant to be connecting with it. So it become like real life. But I'm afraid when you have 15-year-olds saying they hate school and school isn't doing anything, what's the point of school?
Yeah.
There we have it.
Yeah. Something that my son has started doing with the gardening is that he now listens to Audible books. And when he's doing his gardening, he's accessing the story. And he says when he stops to have a drink and just stops working, he actually can't take in what is being said on the story. So again, he needs to be able to move to be able to access his auditory ability.
Right.
And if you can imagine, again, in school, they're told to sit still and not move. And then you switched off the other ability to learn, to listen.
Yeah. That's so interesting, you know, because it's interesting because it's like the more and more I do these things on my platform, the more and more, you know, I know I'm not a traditional teacher. The more and more I'm moving away from traditional teaching, you know, because I am such a because that's one of the things when I go to schools, that's one of the things I say to the principal, I'm not a traditional teacher. I say I do everything non-traditional because, you know, as a psychologist, I don't feel that having children sit in rows and listen to you and have PowerPoints on the board works. That's not how the brain functions. So that's not something I prescribe to.
No, actually, that reminds me of when I was teaching my evening class. And when I first started doing that 30 years ago or more, I used to sit and talk to them about horses. And then I did a training course at the college for a Cert Ed. And I started doing buzz groups and breakout groups and all that sort of stuff. And it did become better. And I had to set the exam paper because it was the British Horse Society Horse Owner Certificate course. So I set the exam paper and I marked the exam papers. And on my computer, I had level 1 questions, level 2, level 3, level 4, as I collected them over the years. Then I started doing my lesson plans based on the Gardner's 8 intelligences, which is what I was talking with Alicia earlier. And so I would make sure that in those 2 hours, I was accessing all of the 8 multiple intelligences somehow within that lesson. And that first exam that these are adult students took after I started doing my lesson plans based in that way, the pass mark went through the roof. Up in the 90s, to the 90%, to the extent that I thought I made the paper too easy. But I thought, well, no, because I'd actually taken the level 2 questions out of my level 2 section on my computer. So they couldn't have been too easy. What had changed is my method of teaching it.
Yes. Yep. That has such a great impact because when you use all the senses, it increases memory, it increases recall, you have enjoyment. You know, there's so many things. Because I keep on saying to educators, don't think that when you sit there and say you're cramming a 2-hour lesson, guess how much the student remember? They only remember less than 20% of the information. So it's a pointless exercise, teaching them for a whole 2 hours. Doesn't make sense.
No.
Doesn't make sense.
No.
We could sit and talk all year about education because we must used to love it.
Our world's right. My son, when he says when he has children at some point, no pressure, he will home educate his own children.
So now you're so wicked.
But my feeling now is that what I'm doing and what I'm promoting with promoting home education is for the future of my potential grandchildren, because I think that is important.
Yes, yeah, I totally agree with you there. And I think that it is so important that we need to start looking at education with difference, because people don't learn the way they used to learn before. And I said earlier on, the pandemic have actually showed us that you do not need to be in the classroom to learn. The pandemic have showed us that we are doing it on the platform. We are doing it everywhere. We're doing it in the home. So therefore, school is closed, but education is going on. That's the situation. So the school is closed, but we have an education still. And that's something need to be get into, into people's head. Even though school is closed, education is still happening. There is a big difference. And it doesn't seem as if people are connecting with the big difference. Now we realize that these buildings, they were closed for some places a whole year, some places over 2 years. This building have closed, but education, school is still happening, but the buildings have closed. So that is a big shift, I feel, for educators in terms of how we navigate education system. And it's also a big thing in terms of home education. And, it's a learning curve for a lot of people. And we need to embrace that. We really do.
Yes. One of the things.
So that's my mission.
Yes. One of the things that comes out of education otherwise is that school is not compulsory. It's education that is compulsory.
Exactly. That's such a difference. That is such a difference. Exactly, because we've seen that the school is closed, but education is still happening. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. That is such a that's so interesting, and it's such a reminder that people need to realize that there is a difference. And education doesn't have to be in the school. Education could be anywhere, as both of you have proved that, you are educating your child anyway, in the park, in the field, at home, in the kitchen, you name it. You're educating your child anyway. And that's the concept people need to start remembering.
He came everywhere with me. I mean, there was one particular occasion, he was about 12 or 13. He'd come along, I had to go and see the bank manager. And he came along and sat in the office with the bank manager. And he had met other bank managers. And afterward, as we were driving home, I said to Simon, "You've met a few bank managers. What did you think of this one?" He went, "He wasn't the best, was he, Mum?"
I like that.
But it makes them discerning. They don't just go, "Oh, bank manager, God, doctors, God." No, they're not. There's that whole, used to be sort of like teachers, doctors, bank managers, you didn't question them. Well, they're nothing more than me to do. They're just people.
Exactly. And what is so beautiful about home education is the child or the children are going anywhere with you. So they're being constantly educated. That's the difference.
Totally.
Yeah. And it doesn't have to be in a book. They're constantly being educated on the run, basically. I just love this, I really do love it. I love it. And more realize, well, me actually taking up this journey, it's a worthy cause. It's a worthy cause.
Oh, totally. Yeah. And I'm just peddling it the whole time. Whenever anyone asks me, I'm going to tell them about home education. I'm passionate about it, as is my son. We just think we think for the children, so many children just hate school, and you just go, that is just so sad. It's their life, it's their childhood that is being ruined by having to go into an institution that is destroying them. And
Yeah,
I think it's horrible. But,
exactly.
like you
And
say,
destroying the personality.
yeah.
Yeah, destroying, they don't even know who they are. Okay, thank you very much, Susan. And thank you very much to my Facebook audience. We had a fantastic session of home education. And I'm sure you guys have learned a lot about, what home education is all about. And education is not in a box. And education don't have to be in the school. As both Alicia and Susan and my other guests have shown you guys, there is a lot of value in home educating. One word from you, Alicia, one word from Susan before we wrap up.
Just want to say thank you, everybody, for tuning in. I hope you've learned a lot, like myself, and thank you so much to our guest, Susan.
All right. Thank you very much, Susan. Is there anything else you want to say?
I just thank you. I've really enjoyed chatting with you guys and being able to put over or tell you about my experience and my thoughts on education. And it's really great that there is this movement that we do need to keep it alive in this country, because the fear is that they're going to stop people being able to home educate. And I think that would be horrendous if that happens.
It's wrong. We need a choice. We need to have choices. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. Thank you very much, my Facebook audience. And, you guys could see it it would be on YouTube or on Facebook. So even though you guys everybody don't see the show right now, it's going to be on the platform so you could see it at your leisure. Thanks a lot, everybody, and see you guys next week with another episode of Female Educator Roundtable on home education and teachers sharing their journey 12 months after.